the general claims that are being made. This is on there is a flare being fired. A warning flare is being fired by GOP members, that is to say, Republicans, who are saying that Trump is already sowing the seeds for, again, insurrection and, again, election denialism, claiming everything is fixed. And there is a real sense of inevitability about violence and protest around this election before it's even held.
Yeah, I'm skeptical that we'll see other than some individual random acts of violence here and there because of the very aggressive way that the Justice Department went after the people who tried to overthrow the government on January 6th. If you want to go support Donald Trump in an effort to violently overthrow the government, not only are you going to be faced with a government not under his control, remember, he didn't send anybody to stop the attack on the Capitol despite numerous pleas to do so. He invited people into the room he was in next to the Oval Office and said, "Look at this, isn't this great? Look what's happening, it's terrific." But it's also very clear that unless something changes, because Donald won't be president, you are going to ruin your life. You're going to go to prison. You're going to lose your family. You're going to lose your home. You're going to lose everything you worked for. I don't think a lot of people are going to go for that. But do I think that there are politicians like Mike Johnson, Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, and people around Trump, like his daughter in law, Laura, who are going to try and scare people with this and stir this up and try to get us talking about it? Yeah, I do. I expect a lot more of it. I just don't expect any kind of significant mass protest. I mean, look at how many people turned out for Donald's trials and arraignments. A handful.
Yeah, there's an effort to stir up raw emotion on the part of the GOP, particularly when it comes to the immigration question also. And they start with the elections, or they throw in the elections, and then they expand to some of these other issues. So it's interesting that, though you can try to stir it up, as you say, the number of people who actually show up continues to be a fairly lower number. It's the upping of that emotional package of grievance that Trump is talking when it comes to immigration, comes to deportation. He's really come out of the weeds on an extremely dark vision of what is to happen. Where he's talking about jailing. Go ahead, David. Yeah, jailing gangs and yeah.
Yeah, Donald, I guess it was yesterday, talked about wanting to summarily hang gang members and drug dealers. And I found the drug dealer one particularly significant because for a decade, Donald Trump was in business up to his eyeballs with Joe Wexelbaum, one of the biggest cocaine traffickers in America. He did incredibly extraordinary favors for him that are laid out in my book, The Making of Donald Trump, and which I wrote about in 1992 in the Philadelphia Inquirer after my friend, the late great Wayne Barrett, dug this up and wrote about it in his Trump book back in 1992. And so for Donald Trump to talk about people who are in drug trafficking being executed, reasonably that would apply to him. And of course, Donald very much projects. If Donald, says something about other people, he's very often talking about himself. The reality is Donald doesn't have anything to sell in terms of making your life better unless you're a racist or a billionaire. He has no proposals that are serious about the economy. On the other hand, he may be successful in his arguments for a very simple reason. People don't understand such basic things as what is a tariff. I spoke to some students at RIT where I teach yesterday, not my regular students, and only one of 40 students knew what a tariff was. And even that student was surprised when I said, well, imagine Donald Trump gets in office and for simplicity, Chinese cars cost $10,000 and he puts a 100% tariff on them. So now if you want to buy a Chinese car, it costs you $20,000. And you're an American car company. What are you going to do? And of course, what you're going to do is raise your price to $19,000 and you're going to make this enormous extra profit without losing any market share and perhaps gaining some from the Chinese, because the tariff allows the domestic companies to raise prices. It's incredibly inflationary. It is, you might love it if you're an extreme environmentalist and want to stop making cars. But Donald is selling things to people where they don't know what they mean. They don't understand the economics of this because a lot of these things have just drifted out of our public consciousness. More than half of the group of students were women. Only two of them were aware that there's a proposal by Trump's allies to track their menstrual cycles.
That's
Completely unaware.
extraordinary. From women, I'm always astounded.
Yeah,
Yeah.
college-age women particularly. It was rather shocking to me that they were unaware of this. They weren't disbelieving when I told them. They were just, completely unaware of this. And so one of the best things Donald has going for him is people not paying attention, and when they do, not knowing the meaning of words, not understanding things. So tonight, in the debate, Kamala Harris, if she's smart, she's not going to try and fact check Donald. She'll call him out maybe on a few of his most outrageous lies, but she's not there to undercut him except through mocking him and showing that he's ignorant. She's there to sell herself. You want to vote for me because I'm going to do something positive for you, as opposed to this guy who just wants to arrest people, round people up, have bloody violence in the country. I got something better for you. I want to have an opportunity economy. I want everybody to have a chance to get somewhere in life. And that's really her job. Mock Donald, get him off his game, and sell yourself. Don't try to fact check him, because you can't do it in real time, and then you just get lost in the weeds.
Yeah, and as you say, it takes you off of your message, I suppose, when you are
Yeah,
just sitting there trying to undermine his. Uh, the tariff thing is astounding to me, and he's hitting it hard. I mean, I watched an entire rally where he talks at length about the fact that he's just riffing, but he said we're going to put 100% tariff on those Chinese cars, as you said, and
right.
and he tries to frame it from the standpoint of it'll be American factories that make the cars. But I love, David, that you point out, I mean, were he able to do that? He's all show and no go. We saw it the last time, and he
Right.
makes a bunch of promises and they never happen anyway. But it would be wildly inflationary. The cost of everything would go up with that kind of protectionism.
Right.
Uh,
And presidents actually have a fair amount of authority to impose tariffs without Congress. And note, any tax has to come from Congress. But tariffs, there are rules Congress has passed that would allow a president, in some circumstances, to impose tariffs. And Trump, in fact, did that. It cost our Midwest soybean and corn farmers a fortune in lost sales to China. And we're continuing to pay them essentially welfare in response. But by the way, the soybean growers of Brazil, oh my goodness, they're thrilled. Their
yeah.
sales to China have just gone up dramatically.
Right. We're a customer to China, but they're a customer to us. It's always
Right.
yeah. Let me ask you about something I found really disturbing in you as a distinguished journalist. I would think this really bothers you as well. I mean, bothers you might understate it in the extreme. The threats to imprison those in media. You've touched on it here before,
Yeah.
and you've touched on it as a very real threat on the part of Trump. But he's not only talking about media, he's talking about those in politics, in the justice system, anyone who speaks up against him. He has spoken in just the last couple of days about wanting to jail and maybe even worse, his adversaries.
Yeah, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised should Donald win the Electoral College, which is the only way he can get back to the White House, is the Electoral College. If at the inauguration he ordered the arrest of Biden, Harris, the three liberal Supreme Court justices, and some other people, and military members stepped forward and handcuffed these people. I don't think he'd execute them on the spot, but would he arrest them? Yeah, I don't see any reason he would not do that. I'm not saying he will. I'm just saying I would not be surprised. Donald has no regard for the law. He doesn't understand the duties of the president. And, the Article 2 of the Constitution is only a few hundred words long, and I can summarize it for you very, very easily. You're the commander in chief, and regarding everything else, you'll do what Congress tells you to do because your job is just to carry out their directives, to be the executive. Donald believes he's a dictator if he gets back to the White House and promises, he says only for one day, he'll be dictator. Somebody can show me an example in the world of someone who became dictator for one day and voluntarily relinquished that. I'll send $1,000 to their favorite charity and we can discuss it in a future show. People can email you if they can provide evidence of that.
Well, this from the New York Times. Donald Trump's been laying the groundwork to claim that there was large-scale voter fraud if he loses, a familiar tactic from his 2016 and 2020 playbooks, but this time coupled with threats of prosecution. Those who may face criminal scrutiny for purported efforts at election fraud, Mr. Trump is saying, will include election workers, a tech giant, political operatives, lawyers, and donors working for his opponent. He's talked about military tribunals for President Barack Obama and reposting fake images of well-known Democrats clad in prison garb. I mean, this is who we are talking about here. Trump with no bottom.
If you want a dictatorship, you should vote for Donald Trump. I mean, there's a real simple message there. You know, if you hate the liberties you have now, your individual freedoms, your First Amendment and other rights in the Bill of Amendments, the Bill of Rights, your ability to go or not go to whatever church or synagogue or mosque you choose. If you hate that, please vote for Donald Trump because he's going to give you what you want. He's going to take away your freedoms. He's going to tell you how to think. He's going to make sure that you're a woman, your health care is controlled by the government, and he's going to have people arrested left and right just because he doesn't like them. And, you know, 9 years ago when I first started saying this, and I was cautioned by a lot of my friends in journalism and elsewhere to sort of back off a little bit, I said, if Donald Trump becomes president, he will never leave office voluntarily, which we found out to be quite true. And I said, and down the road, he would take us. Eventually, there are firing squads, and I expect to be one of the people in front of a firing squad. And that's what you should expect. If Donald Trump gets back in office, dictators have to kill people to maintain their dictatorial position. And we've seen dictator Kim, who Trump expresses his love and appreciation for. He had his uncle assassinated. He had his half brother assassinated. Vladimir Putin has people, you know, assassinated all the time. It's astonishing how many people in prominent positions in Russia fall out of windows on the 10th or 11th floor of buildings. I mean, apparently there are no safety regards. And Donald admires people who behave this way. So, you know, listen to who he says he is. And of course, I come from a culture of investigative reporters where one of our standard phrases is, if your mother says she loves you, check it out.
But quickly, I just want to note that he's got his apologists or those who explain what he really meant was, and one of them is Doug Burgum, the guy who was on his short list to be a vice president. I think what President Trump is saying, Burgum said, is if we have free and fair elections, everybody has to follow the rules, and just putting people on notice is what he said. I mean, how you can paper over the kind of military tribunal stuff and all the rest is, and calling out Obama and the rest. Come on.
More disturbing than that, even though, is what Peter Baker, the chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, did yesterday. And I know you were discussing it before I came on. I'm sorry we had a few technical difficulties. That's why I'm on my cell phone at the moment instead of a fixed camera. The Peter Baker finally writes an analysis piece on the front page of the New York Times that says Donald Trump's been benefiting from news reports not citing what he actually says, because essentially it's unquotable. It doesn't make any sense. And then he gives an example of where Donald is just, you know, on the childcare is childcare, and other nutty comments. And then he completely undercuts it by saying, here's what Trump meant to say. It's not a journalist's job, not even in an analysis piece, maybe a columnist's job, but not a reporter, and Peter Baker is a reporter, to say what Trump meant. And by the way, I don't agree at all with what he said Trump meant. He argued Trump meant that, well, there'll be so much revenue from tariffs that it'll afford child care, although he didn't say anything about using the money for child care. Well, you know, I don't know. You quote what he said. 50 years ago, Mayor Daley in Chicago said some nutty things, and his press staff told reporters, well, quote what he meant, not what he said.
No, that's crazy.
We don't
Just
know what he
crazy.
meant. We know what he said. And we need to get away from this not telling the public that Donald is increasingly incapable of a coherent argument. And I think tonight you're going to see that. It'll be 90 minutes long. They can't leave the podium. And right off, you should expect Kamala Harris will try in her comments that are going to be directed at the hosts and people on TV. There's no audience in the room to get him off his game and then let him run. It's like, if you're trying to catch a fish, once you got the hook set and it wants to run, let it run.
Well, Donald Trump is doing what he always does in that regard, just to, as you touched on this in our last couple of minutes, David, and that he's laying the foundation for what he's going to call a rigged debate. I mean, you're even hearing, Kamala Harris has the questions ahead of time. I've seen it in our chat with a couple of the Trumpies who populate our chat. The moderators are for Kamala Harris. The network is for Kamala Harris. You begin to set the stage for your grievance after the fact if you don't do well.
Right. And Donald has been doing everything he can to lower expectations. No matter what I do, they're going to say I did terribly. And that's because the simple truth is Donald has nothing to offer the American people. He wants the American people to give him the power to go after people he doesn't like, who he feels have wronged him, because he's a child. He's a child, and he is unable to accept adult responsibility. Now, one of the things that's got to be weighing on Donald was when Judge Merchan in the New York criminal case, where he's got 34 felony counts, delayed the sentencing from this month till right after the election. I think it's November 18th. That told me two things. Judge Merchan took away from Trump the opportunity to go running to the Supreme Court to try and interfere with the case. But it also told me that absolutely he's going to give Donald Trump prison time.
Wow.
Because he was going to I've always thought he would give him prison time because Michael Cohen, for the same offenses but charged as different crimes in federal court, got 3 years as his sentence. And secondly, it's very important in the criminal justice system that if you acknowledge your crime, you plea bargain, or after you're convicted by a jury, you acknowledge your wrongdoing, you get treated leniently. But if you spit in the face of the system and of the judge, and Donald has absolutely metaphorically spit in the judge's face, then you get a harsher treatment, and you should get a harsher treatment because you're saying you're going to defy the system of criminal justice in this country. So, Donald will absolutely get a prison sentence from Judge Merchan. But if he doesn't win the Electoral College, it's the beginning of a horrible future for him where he's going to spend the rest of his life, a lot of it and maybe all of it behind bars. He's going to see whatever money he has vanish. And, well, he may get a brief temporary bump in the gifts being made to him. His reliance on people with little to no money giving him money, like the TV preachers, my favorite being the one who prayed and asked his donors to help him get $54 million because God wanted him to have a bigger corporate jet than the one he had. And for 54 million, you end up with something like a Gulfstream 6. You're right at the top of the pile. That's where Donald is going to be, and he's not going to have the same kind of revenue from this and support, and his legal bills are going to mount. Now, one other thing to watch for is next week, Donald can start selling shares of his stock. I don't think you'll see him sell a single share because that would be publicly disclosed. But if he borrows against those shares starting next week, there's no requirement to disclose that.
That is genius.
And that would be a way for him to realize $1 billion or so. And why would one of the companies like Goldman do that? Well, because they immediately will go out and short the stock. And when it collapses, they'll make their money back because they shorted the stock.
That is evil genius. Wow.
So.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.